Thank you for joining us at Python GUI AppsCon 2023. Let's get started on this session. This session is titled Python GUI Frameworks, Delphi FMX, DelphiVCL, PySimpleGUI, Tkinter, and more. I am Eli M with FMXExpress.com. I've been a developer for over 26 years. I deliver content and technology that has reached over 250 million people worldwide, including 4 million developers. And I'm the webmaster of FMXExpress.com, which is a site about Delphi and FireMonkey. On our agenda today, we have what is a Python GUI framework, what are some popular Python GUI frameworks, including Delphi FMX, DelphiVCL, Tkinter, PySimple GUI, PyQT, Kivy, WXPython, libavg, PyForms, Wax, PySide, and Deer PyGUI. What are some popular GUI builders that are out there, visual builders, and then we're going to do some overviews of Python GUI frameworks, and finally we're going to try to write a Python GUI app in each of the frameworks that we listed above using ChatGPT, and we'll have prompts, examples, and source code. So what is a Python GUI framework? A GUI framework is a set of tools and libraries that allows developers to create graphical user interfaces for their applications. Python offers a variety of GUI frameworks that can be used to create interactive and visually appealing applications. What are some Python GUI frameworks? There is Delphi FMX for Python, DelphiVCL for Python, Tkinter, PySimple GUI, PyQT, Kivy, WXPython, libavg, PyForms, Wax, PySide, and there's different versions of PySide. There's PySide 2, but in this case we're going to use PySide 6, and there's Deer PyGUI. There's also others. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just 10 popular ones that I was able to collect together for this session. So let's talk about these three. Let's talk about Delphi FMX, DelphiVCL, and Tkinter. Delphi FMX for Python is a Python wrapper for the cross-platform Delphi FireMonkey framework. It allows developers to build rich, expressive GUIs in Python that can run on multiple platforms like Windows, Mac, Android, and Linux. The Delphi VCL for Python framework. This is a Python wrapper for the Delphi Visual Component Library, or VCL, provides an array of pre-built components for desktop application development. It is mainly used for creating Windows applications with high performance and responsiveness. Tkinter. Tkinter is Python's standard GUI package, being a part of the Python standard library. It is lightweight and provides a simple and intuitive way to create desktop applications. It's ideal for quick prototyping and smaller applications. Now let's look at PySimple GUI, PyQT, and Kivy. PySimple GUI. This is a library aimed to simplify the usage of Python GUIs by providing a more Pythonic interface to Tkinter, PyQT, and other backends. It is a straightforward and easy to understand its syntax, making it a good choice for beginners. PyQT is a set of Python bindings for Qt libraries, which can be used to create cross-platform applications. It's powerful and flexible, but also somewhat more complex than others. It also includes modules for networking, SVG, XML, SQL databases, WebKit, and more. Kivy. Kivy is an open source Python library for rapid development of applications that make use of innovative user interfaces like multi-touch apps. It can be run on Android, iOS, Linux, OS X, and Windows, and is released under an MIT license. WXPython, libavg, and PyForms. WXPython is a wrapper around WXWidgets C++ library, which provides a native look and feel for application on a variety of platforms. It provides a wide range of widgets and controls for application development. libavg is a high-level development platform for creating modern multimedia applications. libavg supports Linux, OS X, and Windows operating systems. It can be used to create interactive systems by using Python scripting. PyForms is a Python framework that enables developers to write cross-platform desktop applications. It provides a simple API for creating Windows dialogues, forms, and other UI elements. Wax, PySide 2, and PySide 6 in Deer PyGUI. Wax is a user-friendly layer on top of WXPython. It allows easier GUI development than when compared with using WXPython directly with more Pythonic APIs. Now, PySide 6 and PySide 2, also known as Qt for Python. PySide 6 provides Python bindings to the Qt library, similar to PyQt. It's maintained by the Qt company and offers a more permissive license than PyQt. And finally, we have Deer PyGUI. Deer PyGUI is a straightforward GUI library for Python designed to help developers create complex and interactive GUIs with a minimal learning curve. Its core feature is a flexible widget system which allows for a high degree of customization, and its easy-to-use API is appreciated for both prototyping and development of larger applications. So what are some of the popular Python GUI builders? So let's take a look at these. So there is Rad Studio, which consists of Delphi and C++ builder. And so Rad Studio contains a GUI builder, and you can export applications built using Rad Studio and use them for Delphi FMX and DelphiVCL library Python applications. So we have Visual Tkinter. This is actually a website where you can go design a visual interface for Tkinter just on the website. And here is the Python code for that. So we have WXGlade, which is for WXPython, and it's a project over on SourceForge. And we can look at some of the screenshots. Let's see here. Some screenshots over here for WXGlade. And so you have a palette. Let's see, it closed up that window. And you have a tree view, properties notebook, and design view. So that's WXGlade. And there's another project called Page over on SourceForge. It has a drag and drop GUI generator for Python, supports mostly TK and TTK widgets. Here's a couple screenshots. Close these up. And then let's look at PyGUI, which has a GitHub repository. And so we'll look down, let's see. It's got an MIT license. Here's how you install it with PyGUI. Let's see if they have any screenshots there. I don't really see any screenshots. Supposedly this is a pretty popular one though. I haven't used it. Then we have Tkinter Designer, which is also pretty popular. It's got 5.9 stars, 5.9 thousand, or I guess it's 5,900 stars. So Tkinter Designer, and so that's for the Tkinter, which is built into Python or the standard library. And so this is just more. Here's examples of it, or I guess these are examples of applications built with it. And there's some licensing information about it. And here's Qt Creator. It's got a view license. Let's see. All right, so it's GPL3 and supported platforms. So this is from the Qt, and so here's the manual. A bunch of information about that. So that one's pretty advanced, I would say. Let's see what else we got here. And here's an interesting one that I found. MD Python Designer. So this is from LabDeck, and so this one supports a number of different GUI libraries. So here's all the libraries. So Tkinter, Kivy, PySide, and MD Python, and the different controls that it supports on each of those different libraries. So this looks like it allows you to build some pretty complex applications. And again, I like that you can use it across different libraries. That looks like a useful feature. So let's move on to the next slide. So here's a Tkinter overview. So Tkinter is the de facto standard GUI package for Python. It's a thin object-oriented layer on top of TCL TK. Name comes from TK interface. TCL is its own programming language that is not needed to use the library. It supports 7 different themes and styles: Win Native, Clam, Alt, Adult, Default, Classic, Vista, and XP Native. There's 18 different widgets, visual components. There's button, check button, entry frame, label, combo box, note box, size grip, and tree view. And there's 3 different layout options: pack, grid, and place. And then again, there's the online visual designer that we looked at, Visual TK. So let's look at Delphi FMX for Python. Here's an overview of that. Embarcadero's cross-platform GUI framework. It's a thin layer on top of FMX. The name comes from the Delphi FireMonkey FMX framework. Rad Studio Delphi is its own tool that but is not needed to use the library. It has 15 different themes and styles. There's default, there's air, Amacritz, Aqua, Graphite, Blend, Modern, Windows, different Windows versions. There's 128 different components, which is broken down into 78 visual ones, 19 subcomponents, and 27 non-visual components. There's 18 different layout options, and then of course there's the visual designer in Rad Studio and Delphi. And then once you design your form in Rad Studio Delphi, you can use the Delphi for Python exporter to export that form and use it in Python. So here we have it loads up this piece into the menu in Rad Studio, and then you can export your form using that solution. And Rad Studio provides a full designer. And so here are some of the styles for Delphi FMX for Python. You can see that I think this one is the air style in the bottom left corner here, and then a bunch of other different ones that there are. So how can we add a style to a Delphi FMX for Python application? Creating a GUI application with Delphi FMX for Python uses the default FMX style for the operating system that you're working on. For example, if you're on Linux, it's going to use the one for that. If you're on Android, it's going to use that. If you're on Windows and Mac OS, it's going to use those default styles. But we can load a new style using the style manager. And you can download this ebook here, which comes with the 15 different styles. So if you go to that URL, which is lp.embarcadero.com, Python GUI getting started, you can download the ebook, you can get the 15 different styles, and then it's as simple as adding the style manager here at the top, or right below the init, and you can load the style from a file. So let's move on to the next one. So here's a PyQT overview. A set of Python bindings for Qt application framework allowing for development on all platforms supported by Qt. It's developed by the Riverbank Computing with dual source and commercial licensing. And again, all these licensing and stuff you need to verify for yourself because things change all the time. And so with all of these frameworks, you should check the licensing, you should check the Python versions that they support, you check all that stuff and make sure that it's still accurate for when you view this session. It combines Python simplicity with robustness of the Qt framework, enabling creation of complex applications. Layout options include absolute positioning, box layout, grid layout, and form layout. Provides extensive functionality including network SQL database, SVG, XML, multimedia, and 2D, 3D graphics support. Features a visual editor called Qt Designer and a Qt Creator IDE, simplifying user interface design. So you've got WXPython, here's the overview for that. It's a wrapper for the cross-platform WX Widgets C++ GUI toolkit, bringing a native look and feel to Python applications across multiple platforms. It facilitates creation of high-performance, high-functioning desktop applications with native user interface controls. WXPython supports Windows, Unix, and Mac platforms. Provides a wide range of widgets from simple buttons and text boxes to more complex ones like tree controls and notebooks. It utilizes various layout managers such as a box sizer, grid sizer, and flexible grid sizer to help position and size widgets appropriately. Moving on, we have the Kivy Overview. It's an open source Python library for developing multi-touch applications, engineered for creating innovative user interfaces such as multi-touch apps across multiple platforms. Uses a custom-built GUI toolkit that provides a wide variety of widgets, enabling development of unique and responsive UIs. The widgets include a button, label, checkbox, slider, text input, scroll view, spinner, pop-up, file chooser, video, and many more. It supports multiple input protocols, including its ability for multi-touch gestures and other modern touch features. The layout options include float layout, box layout, grid layout, page layout, scatter layout, and stack layout. The Kivy designer is marked as depreciated, so I'm not sure how aware that is still actively developed, other than it says it's depreciated. So how can I write Python GUI apps using ChatGPT? So one of the ways, so this is talking about the prompting that we do. So we have to create a prompt in order to ask ChatGPT to write an app. And so in the prompts that I write, I like to initiate ChatGPT with a base expertise, which may or may not work, but seems to work for me. I provide some sample code for a Python GUI application so that it kind of has a reference of what a GUI application should look like for that specific framework. And then I ask for the new functionality that I want it to build. And then you can also use it to convert between different Python GUI frameworks. So what is a prompt for ChatGPT to write a Python GUI app? So this is the prompt that I like to use, or variations of it. You are the best designer and 10x developer and programmer in the world in all programming languages. Create a sample Delphi FMX for Python app in Python that features a ChatGPT-like interface with a list view on the left, a scrolling memo field on the right, and an edit question box on the bottom. Here's a sample of a Delphi FMX for Python app. And then I paste in some code like from a Hello World or another application that's built in that framework, in this case Delphi FMX. So these were all the frameworks that I built an application in. And so then the newest feature in Delphi, or in OpenAI at the moment, is that you can share your chat that you use on OpenAI in ChatGPT. So these are all the shares that I created of the different applications I built. So I'm going to go and investigate these a little bit, and let's look through them. So this is the one for Delphi FMX. So here's my prompt, and then I loaded in my sample Hello World application, and this is what it generated for me. So it created this ChatGPT form. And so for all of these prompts, I really just wanted it to create a generic application that kind of spits back out what I put into it. It's not hooked up into OpenAI at all. It's just, the purpose mainly was to see, can ChatGPT build these Python GUI applications, and then you can add your own functionality. So it generated this application and gave me these explanations of it, and then I went and I compiled that on the command line, and I took any of the errors that it spit back out, and I said, hey, fix your errors, and generate it again. And so then it generated the application again, and in this case it was missing a button. I wanted to add a button, so I asked it to add a button, and it did. And so here's that button click, and here's the button. If we go back up here, you can see that there was no button. It used this key up event. And so I was happy with that, and that was able to compile. So moving on to the next one. So we did DelphiVCL for Python. And this was, again, here's the prompt that I used. And here was the example application that I used as well. So these came from the examples of the GitHub of Delphi FMX and DelphiVCL. So this one actually was a pretty long example. So I pasted that in there. And then this was the program that it created after that. Created all this code here. And then I said, hey, fix your errors. I went and compiled this. I said, fix your errors. And because there was no review property, or at least it wasn't built the way that ChatGPT thought, and it fixed that problem. And then I had it continue fixing whatever issues it had. And finally, I was happy with the output, and it compiled, and I moved on to the next application. So here I did Tkinter. So here was my prompt. I used the kind of the same format for all of them. Here, it was a really short Tkinter example. I mean, maybe there's a lot of code out there. ChatGPT doesn't have any issues with generating Tkinter GUI code. So here was the application I created. We do an import, created this class, added the various controls, and then I went and compiled it, and it gave me this error message, and I had it. I said fix your errors, and it completed the application, and I was able to compile the application. So after I run through all of these, and then I'm going to go show you the applications that were built, and I'm going to run them, and you can see for yourself the different applications that were built. So next up, we have PySimple GUI. So I'm going to click on that one and load that up. So here is, again, same prompt. Here was my sample application, a little bit longer than Tkinter. And so you can see that this one has a little bit different structure here in PySimple GUI. You've got a layout thing here at the top, and then you have a while loop right here. And so I compiled it. It said, hey, there's some errors here. and so then it fixed the errors. In this case, it was operator error. I was like, hey, where's PySimple GUI? And it was like, okay, here, install PySimple GUI, and it did. And so originally, I guess there was no errors besides the fact that I hadn't installed the package yet. So that just run. We'll close that up. Move on here to PyQT. Here's the same prompt that I use, and there was the sample application that I used to pass into that prompt. And here's the code that it generated. We have so this is PyQT 6. There's also PyQT 5. I think I played around with both of them. I ended up going with the PyQT 6 because it was the most recent version. So that was another interesting thing. So not all of these had, I'm using Python 3.11, which is the latest version at the time of this session. And so not all of them supported Python 3.11. So not all of them actually will compile because of that. So let's run through here. So we've got our imports here at the top. We create an application, some different widgets, and then we go down here and we execute our application. So in this case, it connected it to a server, and I believe that was because the example application contained, hey, connect to a server. So I had to rewrite it because I didn't really want it to do that. I had to rewrite it, and this is what it did the second time. And we have our different components there, and send message, and then it compiled right off the bat. Okay, so let's move on to Kivy. We use the same prompt, and then here's our really short Kivy application. Not much there that I had passed into it. And then this is what it generated. It loaded up all these. And it had a class here, has some different objects, main application. And then it explained it. There were some errors. I said, hey, fix your errors. And so it did. And then it went ahead and then it was too complex, I think, on this one. This one was too complex. I was like, okay, you need to simplify this a little bit. And so then it simplified it, and again, so there was even more errors. So then it spit out these errors, which is quite a few different errors. And so then I was like, okay, fix your errors again. And so then it worked on it some more. And then finally, I had a compilable application that worked. Moving on to WXPython. Here's my prompt. Here was the sample code that I passed in. And here's what it came back to me with. There's a class. It creates all its different components. What I found interesting was just how different or how similar all the different code was between the different GUI applications for Python, which makes it really easy, really, from my perspective, to transition between different Python GUI frameworks. So this one either compiled right off the bat, or I wasn't able to get the correct version here. We'll have to see later in the session what happened with that, but I didn't ask it for any more changes. So moving on to libAVG. So here was my prompt. Here was my sample application. And here was the code that it generated. And I think in this one also I don't know that I was able to get it for Python 3.11. We'll have to see later when I try to run it. Moving on to PyForms. So here's the PyForms. Again, similar prompt. Kind of a long PyForms example here, longer than some of the others like Tkinter. And here was the code that it generated. It has lots of explanation, tells you what it did. And here's the imports. And there's all the application that it built. I said fix your errors after I compiled it the first time, and it solved its issues with the next version, and then I moved on, so this one must have compiled after that. Let's see, Wax. I think Wax was one that I wasn't able to compile as well. So here's my prompt. Here is my sample application. And here was the code that it generated. Application run there. And again, I didn't ask for any changes because I don't think I was able to get for 3.11 Python it to compile there. So originally I started out this session with Python, or so PySide 2, and then because it wasn't able to compile under 3.11, I switched it up to PySide 6. And so in this case, here's our prompt, and here is our sample code for PySide 6 that I passed into the prompt. And this is the code that it brought out from that sample and from my prompt. So it creates a bunch of widgets and components, and then its event, and then launches the application. And in this case, it looks like it ran right away. I didn't ask it for any fixes there. And finally, we have PyGUI, Dear PyGUI. And so here is my prompt, and here is what it generated. Looks like I didn't even pass in a sample on this one. Oh, and then it didn't work out. So then I did actually pass in the sample. So here's the sample and my prompt, and here's the code that it generated and some explanation. I went and compiled it. This was the error. I passed in the error back, and it looks like it solved its error. And then I passed in another error, and it gave me another version, and it looks like that version complete and compiled. So I didn't ask it for any more fixes. Okay, so let's move on. And so these were all the applications that it generated. So these are the Python GUI frameworks and what they look like based on the prompt that I passed it and what was generated by ChatGPT. And I have all of those, the source codes for all of them. So you can see here's on this GitHub. But so here's Delphi FMX, here's DelphiVCL, here's Dear PyGUI, here's PyQT 6, Tkinter, Kivy, PySimple GUI, and PyForms. There may be one more that I don't have a screenshot here, and then the other ones I don't have screenshots because they didn't actually compile successfully for me, maybe because of the wrong Python version. So I can click over here, and you can see the source code here. It's all MIT license, and these were all, and there's a link here also to all the different chats where I created the different Python GUI framework apps. And so I'm going to go over here, and so I'm running on Windows here, and I've got, looks like I'm just going to start at the top here. I'm going to run the first one. So Python Dear, and then do a complete there. And so here's the application that it built. So you can see this one's interesting. So it's got this window, and then it kind of has this interface window inside of the window. So if I make that bigger, we can see here's our message, and I can go and type test, and it kind of does this echo test. And that was really all I wanted to do with these sample applications, was create some kind of interface. So you can also see this one moves around inside of this one, inside of this Windows form. So that was Dear PyGUI. You can also see that there is this warning here, but because it didn't stop me from running the application, I just kind of left that warning for now. So let's move on to the next one. Let's run the Delphi FMX. So I also have all the packages that are required to run these. I already have all those installed. I run all the pip installs on all of them, so that's all ready here to go. But in your case, you'd have to install the packages in order to run these applications. So here is the chat. There's the interface that was generated for the Delphi FMX. So we can do a test, and it's going to run and say that. So that's Delphi FMX. And then we're going to run the Python Delphi VCL. And so here was the generated. I thought this one was nice looking. It has the button everywhere. There was no form like covering everything. It kind of actually created it successfully the first time. And then here's our echo back. So that's Delphi VCL for Python. Let's try the next one. So we got Python. Let's see, Kivy's up next. So Kivy has more output here. It's got these other messages, tells you what's going on. And then over here, we can write a message and hit enter, and then it writes that message up there. So a little bit different than some of the others, but that's what it generated from when I asked it and the prompt. Okay, so let's see what else is next. After Kivy, we have libavg, which I'm pretty sure doesn't run. So let's run that one, Python lib. All right, yeah, so that one, I'm pretty sure it just doesn't have Python 3.11 support, so that's was not able to run it. So then moving on, we have PyForms. So Python PyForms, we run that. Oh, so this one has an error, but it does run. So it has some errors there, but it does run, and I can type in my message and send a message, and we get in this chat list. So there was some errors, but it was able to generate this interface, and so therefore I just moved on and left the other errors there. But just interesting which ones work with additional errors and which ones just work. Okay, so let's do the next one, Python I think this is the next one, PyQT. Okay, so here we go. So this one doesn't have a button. We go to test, and we get test. Now some of them do an echo back from the GPT user, and some of them don't. In this case, we just get an echo from this single user. And again, there's no button here. I could probably have asked it to add a button. It probably would have done that. So that's PyQT. So I think here's where I did Python side 2. So this one I'm pretty sure doesn't work because they don't have side 2. I'm pretty sure it didn't have a 3.11 Python support. So I moved on and then created the side 6. So Python side 6, and this one generated and was able to run. So here's side 6. There's no button. Let's run a test, and then we get our echo here. And then moving on to the next one, which is PySimple GUI. So Python PySimple. All right, so that was side 2. All right, it picked up the wrong one. So we did side. We want Python PySimple. So this one runs. So this one's interesting. It already has a theme applied, and we can put it on our message. This one actually has an exit button. It's when you do ascend, and it does ascend here, and then you can also see there's some outputs here in the command line. So I thought that one was interesting. Looks like this form is fixed width, fixed size. I can't change the size of that form. And then let's see what else is left. So we have Tkinter. Tkinter, all right, so here's the Tkinter application. It has a send button. And we push enter. All right, so I can push that button there, and we get the text in the memo. So that's Tkinter. And then finally we have Python WXPython. All right, so this was another one where I didn't have the Python or the WXPython packages installed, so I wasn't able to run that one. All right, moving on. How can I choose the best GUI framework for my project? You should evaluate the size and number of dependencies of the GUI framework, verify that the GUI framework supports the same version of Python as your project, or the latest version. In this case, as you saw, some of them didn't support the latest version, and I just moved on from those. Evaluate the visual controls that your product needs, and if the GUI framework has those controls. You should evaluate the complexity and verbosity of the GUI framework. Is it easy to read and write? Evaluate the capacity of the framework to look nice out of the box, use styling, etc. And then evaluate if it has a visual designer, which can increase productivity significantly. So all those things you can look at when you go to choose a Python GUI framework. And that is the conclusion of our session. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was a good overview of all the different Python GUI frameworks that are out there. We didn't cover every single one that is out there, but that was a lot of the popular ones. And I hope it was a good example of using ChatGPT to generate applications as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.